we come to today's guest, Tenny. Tenny is part of Keiken, and Keiken is an art collective that was co-founded by you and Hannah Omori and Isabel Ramos already in 2015. You are based between London and Paris. You all met in London. London and Berlin. It's not Paris. But you all met in London. And you come from very different backgrounds, which kind of play into your work as well. And your collective title is actually taken from the Japanese word of experience. The lived experience being an idea at the core of your practice. And you guys work collaboratively in building and imagining worlds, metaverses, and also to simulate new structures and ways of existing. And I'm very happy that you, as kind of final, representing a collective, as the final talk here of the Juxtaposition lectures are here with us today, which was very much about collaboration, was very much about kind of transdisciplinarity. And that said, Tenny, thanks for being here, and a warm applause to our guest.
Hi everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the introduction as well. Is the thing working? It's working? It's okay. Okay. Yeah, it's really great to be here, and thank you so much for the introduction as well. You've kind of just said a lot of the things that I was going to say as well, but that's okay. I'm just going to play this video while I just introduce myself a little bit again. So this is just a slideshow with some of images of our recent works from installations, stills from videos or games that we've made. But yeah, just to reiterate on who we are or who I am. So I'm 1/3 of Keiken. We've been working together since we were also studying fine art at university in England in the southwest. And I think I'm not really sure why we started to collaborate. It was a very kind of like organic process. We've been friends for a very long time. And the thing that really kind of centers everything that we do and the way that we approach is really just this idea of creating experiences, whether that's doing something that pushes the boundaries of an immersive experience or doing something that explores the nature of consciousness. And I think this is really, even though whilst we were at uni, we were working in very different mediums, it's always something that has just been like a thread throughout. So, yeah, like was said before, we use a lot of world-building methodologies in our practice collaboratively. That's the way we think about how we collaborate together, but it's also the way that we create the narratives and the concepts for our work. So we're always simulating new structures as an idea to kind of imagine new ways of existing and also test drive these possible futures. And just, I guess it's about exploring what are the implications of new technologies or what are the possibilities for expanding our consciousness as humans as well. But the kind of one of the main things that we really like to do is with this world building and with the works that we create is to try and create an experience or a narrative that it's centered around a new world or a new story, and that this has to kind of somehow pierce our perception of reality today and defy all that we know to try and create something new or alternative. So we're working in many different mediums, from filmmaking, installation, gaming, extended reality, AR and VR, sculpture, that's more recent, sometimes blockchain and sometimes performance, but primarily everything happens in a gaming engine. So we work in Unreal Engine, and that's really kind of the root of everything. Even though it's very digital and very virtual, it always eventually becomes physical as well. So yeah, you've probably seen a couple of slides. So I actually thought today I'm going to talk a little bit about the beginning of our collaboration, because I always think it's quite interesting, especially for students, to see how collaborations can emerge and how they can grow and evolve and turn into something completely different to what you expected as well. And then I'm going to talk specifically about one project that we've been doing for like the last 6-8 months or so. I thought it would be nice to just do a bit of a deep dive, because we work with a lot of different mediums and also talk about lots of different concepts, so it can be a bit confusing when we go over like 4 or 5 different works. So yeah, hopefully that will be nice for you guys, and there'll be a Q&A at the end, so if you have any questions then feel free. Did that go next? Okay, cool. So yeah, these are some of our really, really early works that we were doing as a 3 between me, Izzy, and Hannah before we actually started collaborating as Keiken. So we've been friends for 10 years or more than 10 years. Like Hannah and I grew up in the same town, and then we met Izzy when we went to university. So we started out as friends, just, I don't know, being at art school, not really knowing what we were doing. And then one day, probably about 7 or 8 years ago, we just decided that we were going to collaborate together. We didn't really know what that meant. We didn't know how to collaborate. We didn't know what we wanted to do together. We just kind of decided that we were going to do it, and we committed to it. Like, I don't really understand why we took it so seriously back then, but we did. And I think it's just interesting to talk about like where the origins of our work kind of came from, and how that's like, how not only the ideas have maybe evolved or stayed the same, or stayed within the same vein, but also how the mediums that we're working in have completely transformed, and how we are not at all, we don't really stick within one medium. We're very interested in exploring a lot of different technologies to see how we can create different experiences. So some of the images you see are just like different installations where you can see films. Like in this, on the left-hand side, it's like a tower that you can climb up and watch a film. We all did a lot of drawing individually, and Izzy and Hannah were doing a bit more performance. But I think the thing that we did at first when we just decided we were going to collaborate, we just sat down and we spoke about, well, what are you interested in? What do you care about? Like, how can we're doing really different things, and how can we bring ourselves together and do something that is meaningful to all of us together? And the main thing that we kind of kept coming back to, or circling back to in these conversations, is this idea of experience. And I think, like I mentioned before, it really is just this idea of how can we create immersive experiences that really invite the audience to be part of that world of the artwork? How can they be something that's not just a passive spectator? How can they actually engage with the work? And how can they experience something that takes them outside of their reality and invites them to question it? So this is just this idea of pushing the boundaries of experience. And then another huge part of it is just exploring the nature of consciousness, or what it is to be human, and how our consciousness evolves with society, and how can we expand it as well. So yeah, really just this central thing is this idea of Keiken, or experience. So Hannah, who is not here, but her mother is Japanese, so that's where the title comes from. But yeah, I think it's kind of fascinating because we've evolved so much, and we weren't really doing very technical things while we were at uni. When we graduated, we started teaching ourselves all these new skills, and actually, despite having gone in a direction that I didn't expect us to go into, we're still exploring those same things about pushing the boundaries of experience and the nature of consciousness. So I think that I don't know, I just think it's quite a nice thing to share. So yeah, I just thought I'd show them. They're kind of silly. There's some images from our early collaborative work. So we've got, I don't know, we didn't know what we were doing at first, so we just started out on having a blog on Tumblr, as you do back in those days, and we were on making these like performance Twitter accounts where we'd have different narratives from different characters that only existed online. We were doing performances outside in the nature where we lived, and also just trying to create experiences where you could view filmic or narrative works unconventionally. So this was all happening still while we kind of still at uni, these works, but then when we graduated, we were like, oh, well, we know that we want to keep working together. We know that we want to create these big experiences, something that feels very tangible and physical and visceral and takes you outside of your reality. But at that stage, we didn't have any budgets whatsoever. We were kind of self-funding everything, or kind of like scraping anything. We even wrote to our uni to get them to give us money to do projects after we graduated, which didn't result in a lot, but it helped us. Yeah, so when we were at this stage, we were like, well, how can we do it? How can we actually create something that feels like has like a big energy and a big presence without any budget and without just any resources, really? And the thing that we ended up kind of falling into was doing a lot of performance, because you can do a lot with sound. People are so fascinated by other people in spaces, and it really, I think you can really take people outside of their everyday moment when you're in this kind of environment or kind of subverted situation. So we were really thinking about and doing a lot of these kind of RPG or role-playing game style performances. And it would kind of involve working with ourselves and also collaborating with a lot of our other friends and artists, musicians or fashion designers, dancers. We'd just kind of get everyone involved, and we'd be working about these different themes, and it would always be something where there would be like an overarching kind of situation happening where the performers would be almost like actors, I suppose, and they'd be living out these worlds, and then there'd be tasks or opportunities for the audience to engage somehow. And for us, this was a really great territory for exploring and figuring out what we wanted to do. It allowed us to kind of create a lot of like content and work with different mediums. Like we were doing stuff with sound and with video, and also just, I guess, yeah, it was really very exploratory, but for us, it was a really great way to create these immersive experiences and try and create simulations of different, the narratives that we were working at the time. Another thing that we did that I think was very kind of, it's not like our most important work or anything, but it was like a seminal thing for us and how we started figuring out how we collaborate together, was we were invited to do this lecture, and we decided to do it very performatively. So that's the image at the bottom. And at that stage, it was an academic lecture that we were invited to do, but we don't really like working academically. I think it doesn't really suit any of us. So we just were kind of pulling all our research together, and we wrote this kind of like, I think the script was like an hour long, but we just brought in a lot of research that we were doing about the time from kind of, I guess, just different topics around capitalism and about empathy and care and also climate change. It kind of had everything that we were interested in, and we just pulled it in together into this kind of strange performance. But because were kind of encouraged to do it, it allowed us to actually kind of tie everything together, and it was our main first experience of doing like collaborative or trans-authorial writing. And I think this is also something that's really underpinned our practice. Like everything kind of begins with writing together, and that's stories that we have kind of just like plucking from our everyday experiences, and then also just coming together and like weaving those threads together. So yeah, I just wanted to share some of those things, just so you guys can kind of see how we've evolved, I think, and how we've gone from doing these very, what's the word? I guess they're quite, even though they're physical performances, there's like a virtuality to them anyway. Like they're very transient, they're very ephemeral, but they're supposed to kind of create these experiences that take you outside of your reality, like a liminal moment, something where there's space for transformation to happen. So yeah, and then I think I was mentioning it earlier, but our approach to our collaboration together as a practice, it's really one of care and of nurture and growth, really. And I think we really treat our relationship in collaboration as world building, as well as the way that's how we actually treat our approach when we're coming up with all the work that's really very narrative driven. And when you do world building, it's very it's kind of amazing because it allows you to kind of create a space that encompasses everyone and encompasses everyone within a collaboration, but it also invites people to be independent within that, and it creates space for their different directions as well. So we always think about it as something it's not linear, it's circular, and it just kind of grows outwards in all different directions. And I think the same thing really applies to the different works that we have. So even going back, I guess, like 3 or 4 years, there are still kind of characters or entities or even technologies that we've imagined in our like future narratives that they are still appearing in the works that we're creating today. So even if it was a film that was finished 3 years ago, there's still ideas from that are really like seeding this world, and they're kind of like growing into new things in the stories that we're telling these days. So yeah, there are all these like ongoing storylines and symbols that they have these direct roots and connections to the pre-existing works, but I think it's a case of everything kind of having this symbiotic relationship and everything being very fluid in the way that we're working. But some of our research that I'll go into some of this a bit more later also, but some of the research that we're very kind of focused on is, I guess it's this different kind of researchers or thinkers who have these very like divergent models, and they are interested in using disciplines but exploring them in new forms. And we're particularly interested in neurology and interspecies intelligence and cognitive evolution. But I think it's a huge part of what we're doing is this speculative thinking as a kind of legitimate way of impacting how we exist within our own world. So it's speculative thinking in the narratives and the future stories that we're creating, but also how can we kind of bring that back in today? So that's this world-building approach. It's very much about the work itself, but also about our relationship to each other and to everyday stuff as well. So yeah, and then I'm going to go straight now into talking about the work that I'm going to talk about primarily today. So this project that we've been doing, we started doing it, I'd say, about 6 or 8 months ago. It's called Morphogenic Angels, and it's this ongoing world-building project that we have, which, I don't know, we presented it at HOW in late May, so I think I met some of one or two of you there, so hopefully some of you have seen it before, but yeah, I'm going to be doing a bit of a deep dive into it. So Morphogenic Angels it's essentially a controller game, and that's the main thing that we're working on within this world. Is it's a fully immersive game, but it also the world of Morphogenic Angels as a world-building project. It also encompasses a film that we made last year, which is called Morphogenic Angels and the Bubble Theory, which is set in the same universe, but it's really got actually it's not the same narrative as what happens in the game. So I guess there's this element of I think like a lot of us we read a lot, and we're very interested in like sci-fi and different stories that have this kind of like worlds within worlds, I guess. So you can, and their stories are kind of modular. Sometimes they connect in a very tangible way, and other times they just exist in the same world. But yeah, so chapter 1 that is this of Morphogenic Angels is a controller game. We actually made the first prototype for CO Berlin last December, and then we made a kind of filmic demo of it for Somerset House in London, and then recently we just showed it at its current stage at HOW in May. And in October, we're going to be presenting it for the first time in a gallery context. So there's kind of a lot. The process of making a game for us, I think, is something that was, we've never done it before. We've been working with a lot of gaming engines for a long time, but we haven't really ever used them for their primary purpose. So it was really kind of a big learning curve for us, but it was also something that I felt was quite essential to Keiken, and just going back to that idea of what Keiken means and about it meaning essentially just experience. And the best way that we can create these kind of experiences is by creating these games that allow people to really embody another character. But for us, it's not just about creating a video game that exists completely on its own. We're also very interested in the physical experience of that as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the technological developments that we've been doing with the game. But yeah, it really was this big learning curve where we had to learn how to use this medium in a completely different way. Like, we've been using it in a very hacky way to create films, and now we're really using it in a way that allows us to do lots of just really fascinating things that we didn't know were possible, and it's been a really great process. So I'm going to share a couple of clips. I'll move my head, but this one was just from the actual presentation at HOW, where members of the audience could come down onto the stage and try the game. Hopefully it plays.
Not a single cell. We treat ourselves as though we are a material or solid thing. We've coded it to make us think that we're a living being that exists in the present moment with memories.
And then this one is just a clip from the actual game itself, just to give you guys an idea.
We are here to play a spiritual game.
And then I'll share this clip as well, but before we actually presented it at HOW, the drag performer Is She Hungry premiered the game on Twitch, which was, it happened about a week before we presented the game, and it's one chapter with 7 levels, but the last 4 levels we made in about 12 weeks, so it was this very intense, very fast production, and we had no time to do user testing or get feedback on how people responded or understood the mechanics. So the first and only time we were able to do that before presenting it was live streamed on Twitch, which actually worked out in our favor because Hungary is a really great gamer, and we just figured out a lot of bugs in the process, but it's quite a fun clip.
Who is that?
¿Quién es? Mi escudo de energía casi está descargado.
Oh no.
No reconozco el ritmo de esa caminata.
Yeah, it was really great for us because something that we've been doing, I guess, for the last 3 or 4 years anyway, is really figuring out how we can create characters digitally, and it's been a process that's been it's taken us in many different directions, but we're really curious about creating these very non-human forms. So for us, it was a really great pairing to be with Hungary doing this because they ended up dressing up like the main character, Yaxu, so that was really a surprise for us, but it was really great as well. I'm just trying to bring the mouse back so I can use it here. Okay, cool. Great. Sorry, I don't know why they're all playing. So yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about, I guess, the origins of this project. So we spent the last, I guess the last year or the last 6 months kind of developing this world building and this imagined future that Morphogenic Angels exists in. So it's set in this protopia that is 1,000 years from now, and this idea of a protopia is something that we were really curious about because it's something that's neither utopian or dystopian. It's actually somewhere that's, I guess it's not in between, but it's somewhere that it's not really idealistic and it's not really, really negative and distressing. It's actually something that just strives to be better but doesn't kid itself and think it's perfect. So it's a society where, a protopian society is one where people are free from the kind of gridlocks that exist in everyday life, and they can work actively to improve life or improve consciousness or improve everything like that. So I think it's this kind of idea of something being, it's kind of like dream societal transformation somehow, and it doesn't promise that everything will be perfect for everyone. It just kind of focuses on the possibility of moving in mutually desirable directions, or moving collectively together towards progress and continuously. They know it's like this process of evolution, really. So yeah, it has the capacity to become incrementally better and hopeful and practical, not idealistic. So when we were kind of imagining, the core thing that we kind of started off with was, how can we imagine a future that's 1,000 years from now? Like, we're very used to thinking about new technologies currently and how they're going to affect us in our everyday lives today, and what will things be like in 5 years. But for us, it was like the challenge and the excitement was thinking about something that's completely different to now. We don't know how it's going to be possible. It's not about answering those questions. It's just thinking about how we could explore the limitless potentials of technology, and how we can also explore things like transhuman upgrades, or things from biologically re-engineering humans to add sensory abilities that are from other species, or things like that. So within this kind of early research stage, we were just exploring new rules and systems, and thinking about how in this world maybe there'll be things like AI governance, or maybe there'll be these infinite simulations or virtual worlds that feel as real as the Earth do. And yeah, when we began this project, it was really this kind of big, difficult process of trying to figure out these questions and trying to think about potential storylines or potential characters that could be existing in there. But we just really wanted to create a world or something that was so far ahead in time that it would give us the space to actually imagine something completely new and think about something completely alternative, a new structure or a new way of living. But I think despite that, there's always something that's just very grounded in the present day within our work. So we are, I think sometimes there's this idea that we reflect on the contemporary moment as though it's history, and then that allows us to kind of observe what's happening right now with a bird's eye view. If we kind of like extract ourselves from it and just try and think about things with a very overview, I think it allows us to kind of condense some of the like fears or hopes or concerns of every day, and they do feed into these future worlds, but we just think about how they might have evolved from there. So some of the questions we were asking ourselves were, what would it be like to wake up in this time, or how would our consciousness evolve, and what would our relationship with the Earth and other beings be like? And so all of these big questions, and they're very vague and very like open-ended, they kind of planted the seeds for the series that we're working on for morphogenic angels. But really it's this idea with this project that it unfolds in a radically different time and space, one that defies and transcends our current political, societal, financial, and subjective realities. So in this future world, humans have these morphic upgrades which is by organically re-engineering and merging their cells with the cells of other beings, from plants to animals to extraterrestrials. And it's really this overarching theme of being able to explore and connect with non-human consciousness. So we keep saying, or like you'll probably keep hearing me saying the word morphogenic or morphogenesis, and I just want to explain what that actually is, because that's rooted in science that's actually happening right now in today. So morphogenesis is a biological process that causes a tissue or organ to develop its shape by controlling the spatial distribution of cells during embryonic development. So I guess what that means is that it just, there is this idea that we can actually control forms as they're evolving and actually shape the way they turn out. We can control them, and not control them, but we can transform them into something else. We can cross things over to create new forms or new lives as well. So in this world, because humans have these morphogenic angels, they're no longer considered humans, they're actually now angels. So they all have these post and transhuman qualities, and they value all kinds of intelligence and consciousness, whether that's ancestral, bodily, extraterrestrial, animal, natural, cellular, or cosmic. So in this future world, they are able, with these new morphic abilities that they have, they're actually able to live for hundreds of years. So they have this kind of life extension that we don't experience today, but they don't experience the same life just for a very long time, long and unimaginable period of time. They actually experience this extended life through many different cycles of evolution that happens through the morphogenesis that they experience. So if they start out human, and as they grow into their adulthood or their first kind of like early stages, they begin to kind of evolve more and more with different cells. So as they progress later on into their life, they become more and more non-human. And each time they have this evolution, it's a bit like they are waking up in a new life again. So then they almost, rather than having just one childhood that's short and a very long adulthood, it's almost like they go back to childhood again. They have to rediscover things based on the new sensory experiences that they have. And because of this, the idea of kind of knowing oneself today, it feels like a very open-ended exploration. But in this future, with these different kind of morphic upgrades and morphic abilities that they have, the longing to know oneself actually becomes a bit like exploring a black hole. And it's also something that trusting others or trusting other angels in this world, who have also lived through many different evolutions, this also becomes an exercise in connecting to the unknown. So this idea of morphogenesis, or kind of having new sensory abilities, is one of the main themes, and also this idea of connecting to the unknown or the intangible also. But I just wanted to explain a little bit also about where our interest in expanding our sensory perception or expanding our consciousness comes from. And it's this term that I know it's a German word, it's Umwelt, but it's a term that's used, I think it's most commonly used by ethologists. And I think there was some ethologists were talking about it, and there's a statistic where I think it's only like, as humans, we only experience 1/10 of a trillionth of reality. What we experience of the world is so small, we can't actually like trust it as being true. Like the world and what kind of experiences we could have of the world is so much vaster than anything that we could actually imagine. So this idea of being able to expand our Umwelt, or our slice of reality, is something that's really kind of central to this research, or this like concept with our work as well. So I'm going to play a little clip again now. It's the first kind of, it's the beginning of the game, and then I'll go into the next bit. So just play it now.
Have you ever thought about how you might perceive in 1,000 years' time? What do you see? How do you feel? What do you think? What is our future suffering? And what do we long for?
No te preocupes. Acabas de evolucionar.
Bueno, acabo de evolucionar. Acabo de evolucionar y he evolucionado muchas veces antes.
Así es. Eres un ángel morfogénico. Estás programado para evolucionar tu conciencia con otras especies con el tiempo. Estás a punto de comenzar una nueva evolución.
¿Significa eso que ya no soy una niña? ¿Quién va a cuidarme?
soy yo esta vez. ¿He dejado acaso de ser un ángel? Hace mucho frío.
So that clip that I just showed was the first cutscene and the first kind of the beginning part of the gameplay. So the player plays the main character of this story, and they're called Yaxu. So as you saw in the video, you start off as the player and you've really kind of just woken up. You've had this evolution happen, but you don't really know where you are or who you are or what's going on. And it starts off with this kind of conversation with Yaxu's ancestor telling them and kind of beginning as this kind of guide and just kind of grounding them in where they are. And then Yaxu spawns into the world and they're experiencing the world for the first time, which is the same as you, the player, playing it for the first time also. So they're landing in this world in their new shell or their new body, this new design that they have. So because they're starting off in this new evolution and they've just evolved, they're not really feeling very well. They're kind of feeling very vulnerable. We've kind of designed the environment in the game to also reflect this and to connote this feeling of something that's very like daunting and cold and lonely. And you as the player, when you're playing it, you also don't know what's coming ahead and you have to venture into this unknown. So that's this like the very kind of beginnings of this game is this kind of, I guess, this feeling of vulnerability and fear. So the way that we've kind of developed this game is because we're artists and we work primarily in like art-based contexts, so that's whether like museums or institutions or places like that, we've had to also take that into consideration that our main audience isn't people who are really familiar with gaming. And it's also important to us to present it in a way where it's not just a valuable experience for one person at a time, it's also something that can be enjoyed by a wide audience at the same time. So the game is kind of designed to be like a film. It has, in the clips I'm going to show you, there are almost no HUDs or heads-up displays where there are statistics or anything like that. So it's really something that's been designed to be experienced, that can be enjoyed as a film, but also played as a game at the same time. But it's really, the whole kind of project has been really influenced by different simulation games, and we're really, like I said, with this, just like going back to the idea of Keiken or the idea of experience, with creating a simulation game, the idea is we want to create an experience that allows somebody to embody the character, and it allows them to feel like they're really inside this world. I'm going to talk in a bit about some of the technological things that we've done to kind of like get us to that stage. But I guess we've really been working on these different systems within the game, like dynamic breathing and dynamic weather, and this trying to create this very alive and living simulation of the game. So it's always changing. Everything that happens in the game is a live situation. So nothing is pre-rendered. It's all happening in the moment. There's also, we work with a really brilliant sound designer and musician called Waves of Space, so we've worked really closely with them to make sure that we can use sound to create this very visceral experience, because sometimes sound is the most tangible and physical thing. I think people really underestimate how important sound is for creating narrative works. So yeah, in addition to simulation games, another big inspiration has also just been films and role-playing games that have just take you on these journeys to try and understand new worlds. So I'm going to play another little clip now.
energía casi está descargado. No reconozco el ritmo de esa caminata. Me huele que es segura.
So in this clip, you can see that Yaxu, the main player, they have this kind of ultra sensitive hearing. So when they're kind of first walking up the mountain, they can hear these footsteps that you can't see anything. The footsteps are actually coming from all the way up the mountain. It's not possible for someone, a human like us today, for us to be able to hear those kind of footsteps from that distance. So we also wanted to kind of try to bring in this idea of these like expanded sensory experiences. So that's one thing that we've done with the hearing, that the player can hear the character before they appear. And they also, when they have this first interaction with the NPC, the non-player character, Anamtu, when they have this first interaction, you'll see that the first thing that they were doing is they were smelling each other. So we wanted to try and I guess just ground this world in this idea that people, or the angels, they have these very different perceptions. They are able to communicate in different ways. And they're also able to just use these experiences to help them maneuver in the world. So both Yaxu, the player, and Anamtul, the NPC, they have these morphic upgrades and abilities through organically re-engineering and merging their cells with the cells of other beings, whether that's plants or extraterrestrial or animal or anything of the list that I mentioned earlier. So Yaxu, the player, is part horse, octopus, eel, and human, and Anamtul, the NPC, is part praying mantis, extraterrestrial, and human. So one of the challenges that we had when we were kind of building out the game to begin with is how we can embed these non-human sensory experiences into the game, and how we can kind of cement that as a way, and also introduce it into the mechanics as well. So for example, Yaxu is part eel, and they have these, the main mechanics in the game is their use of their energy or their electricity. So Yaxu can use their energy to create a shield to protect themselves. They can use it to release energy or shoot energy, and they can also use it to connect with other beings. So, but one thing in the game is just that their energy is finite. They have to kind of like be resourceful and be careful about how they use it. But this idea of angels, or being able to be organically re-engineered and merged with the cells of other entities, was really influenced by the scientist Michael Levin, who has done this really pioneering research on morphogenesis. So in his research, he's used this concept to be able to reprogram cells to grow new forms or grow in different structures than they were. They're actually usually capable of doing it. And he's had successful experiments with frogs and also with this type of worm, which the name I don't remember actually. But with using the morphogenesis and his science, he's been able to like recalculate the growth of different limbs, or they've done experiments where they've removed a tail and instead they've been able to grow back a second head. And this is all happening through this like electrical re-engineering of the cells. So that's kind of very like at the forefront of how we've been thinking about it. But anyway, it's really about having this future that we're thinking about that is not really human-centric. It's a future that goes beyond our umwelt or our human perception. And there's this kind of phrase that we like, I think Michael Levin said it also, it's that if we want to understand the universe, we have to kind of combine it with the consciousness of other things. So I also wanted to mention that The names of the characters have meanings. They are words from the Huastec language. So my father's family are descendants of the indigenous people, the Huasteca people of Veracruz in Mexico. And although the lineage is getting different, you know, it's not like that language is not something that's like prospering. It's something that we wanted to kind of preserve somehow within the works that we're making, especially the ones that we're catapulting into the future. So Yaxu means blue, and we felt this was kind of quite fitting because they are kind of, they're very vulnerable and very emotional in this like early stage of their evolution. And Anamtu means earthly body of the human being, which we felt was very fitting with their extraterrestrial and praying mantis combinations. Do I have to stop soon? Is it okay? So I'm going to play another video clip. And
Respira. Toca tu nueva
Mi
caparazón.
mente está fuera de
Y
mí.
recordarás.
Los espíritus están dentro, no están dentro. Están, fueron, seré, yo. El lago de hielo es tan grande. Necesito llegar al otro lado. ¿Qué les hice? ¿Qué fue lo que no hice? ¿Podría haberlos ayudado? ¿Podría haberlos ayudado? No estaba yo, no fui suficiente. Estoy equivocada, contundente, inconsciente. Demasiado rápido, demasiado lento. Soy el culpable. Fue su culpa. Me siento tan sola. So just, I wanted to talk now a little bit about some of the kind of technical process behind what we've been doing, and also some of the things that we are aiming to do in the future with this game. So it's a controller simulation game, so you're using an Xbox controller to play it. But like I was saying earlier, although it technically is a one-player game, it's not really a one-person experience, and the things that we've developed to actually enable this have been to allow it to be something that can be experienced as a film also, has been this dynamic camera system that we've developed ourselves and with the programmer that we work closely with, that it allows gameplay to seamlessly transition between the cutscenes. So it creates this really cinematic feeling, and it really pushes the boundaries of merging both like film and game together. So the camera system is controlled in gameplay, but it's also kind of predefined, so it really allows us to kind of illustrate or accentuate certain parts of the narrative. And it allows others to watch it like a film and because I don't know if any of you are gamers, if you ever watch anybody else playing a first-person game, usually you have full control of the camera and it's 360, and it can give you a lot of, if you're not the one playing it, it can give you a lot of motion sickness. So we've been really thinking about how we can make it accessible to a wide audience at the same time. And then the other thing that we've been really trying to hone in on is how we can actually make it feel even more like a simulation. So the one thing that we've been doing or developing is this idea that the internal thoughts of the character, the internal thoughts of Yaxu, and also their other kind of like sounds that are representative of their emotional state or also the environment, those sounds are played simultaneously as the sound that's external in these bone conduction headphones, which are headphones that they're not on ear or in ear, they kind of sit above you, and the sound travels through vibrational waves into your, like through the bone. And what that does is it actually allows you to kind of really feel like you are embodying the character, and it creates this much more embodied experience of the game. So there's also other kind of visual cues that we've been using to illustrate the physical health of the character, such as their energy becoming, if their energy is decreasing, then their body and their animations will begin to kind of limp and get slower. Or maybe they'll get more tired or more fearful, and there'll be these kind of different audio experiences at the same time. So we've kind of developed this technology, but we haven't yet presented it, and it's something that we're going to be working towards in the future, because it's something that we just want to kind of like push this idea that you can actually feel like you are part of the game and part of the world. You're not just passively interacting with it. Another thing that we've been doing is developing kind of diegetic UI, so that's the user interface and making sure that we can communicate some of the different kind of concepts around the player's energy and how they're feeling in a way that's also can feel quite embodied. But some feedback and some experience that we had from our first showing of the game was just that it's very difficult to communicate a lot of concepts in a very kind of short period of time. So for us, the challenge now is really being able to kind of simplify or crystallize everything so it's really tangible for going forward. But yeah, I think that is everything. Maybe for now. I don't know if it's better to move on to questions. I was going to show a little bit about the motion capture that we did, but
a quick one and then
okay, sure. Okay, so yeah, like I was saying, the process of making the game is really intricate. So we've been working with a lot of different mediums. We've been using motion capture and working with the performer, and the performer, Sophie Mars, she's also Berlin-based, but she has actually made the animations and the actions for every single character within the game. And there's this big kind of focus for us while we were doing the motion capture on how we can create movements that are non-human, but also can kind of still exist in these humanoid bodies. So there's a couple of clips. Maybe. That's really nice, moving around like that. They're just some short, like, I guess, in progress kind of shots, but a lot of the movements were really influenced also by Buto, the Japanese contemporary dance that's very, it's quite different to usual contemporary dance, so I think that was something that we wanted to kind of like push into the game as well. But yeah, thank you for listening, and if you...
Thank you so much for this incredible deep dive into one project in particular. So it's time for you guys to ask questions. I can break the ice with a very banal question, but you showed the early projects when you guys met, and they were more in the field of illustration, performance, sculpture. So what was the breaking point when you decided to, let's say, work only with Unreal Engine or enter the gaming world? What made you take that step?
I think it kind of happened naturally and around the same point that we started like doing these big performances at the beginning. I think when we were doing those performances, it was great because you could make a big immersive experience. You could kind of create these narratives without showing anything. It was all through the storytelling, through the performance, and through the sound, and through the environments that we created. But we were also quite interested in. I think it was quite stressful doing these performances for us because they were really low budget, and we wanted to be able to make something that actually lasted a bit longer than one evening or 2 or 3 evenings or something. So because everything that, even with those performances, everything was very kind of centered in narrative, we just wanted to create a film, or we wanted to kind of like create something that would be longer lasting. And we didn't know any of these skills to do with CGI or gaming whilst we were at uni. We learnt that all afterwards just by speaking to friends who were doing it, getting them to give us tutorials, spending a long time on YouTube and on different forums learning things the hard way. But I think that break point kind of came because I think we were a bit tired of doing performance, and we wanted to create something that felt a bit more just less ephemeral. And I think it also, we were interested in trying new technology, so we spent a long time doing different things. Like we first started off making a 360 VR, then we started off working in like AR, and that was kind of like the gateway drug into getting further and further into like working with Unreal Engine and working on building characters from scratch, building every asset ourselves. And I think it felt kind of natural for us. Like I think we just really enjoy it. And I think, but we're not very limited to this idea of only being in the gaming engine. I think it's really also about, that's how we like to work, but the outcome isn't just that. We really want to create something that feels very physical, feels very experiential.
Okay, first question for you guys. Who wants to go first? Yes, please, Martin.
Thanks so much for this super rich and interesting presentation. My question goes into a kind of similar direction, because you mentioned that you were very interested in science fiction in general, and I also took it that you that was also like reading science fiction books. So I was interested, just intrigued, like what works of science fiction have been kind of like the most influential for you as a group, and also what are your experiences with the different possibilities of telling a story in language, in the form of book literature, versus doing it in an gaming.
So, to do with science fiction or the books or the stories that have really influenced us, I think for me personally, it's definitely been a lot of the writing of Ursula Le Guin and Octavia Butler. I think I'm really sorry, I'm really bad at names and I can't remember the names of any of the books, but there's one series in particular from Octavia Butler which is about it's set in a future where kind of these alien creatures have come, and they've kind of, because there was so much war and destruction, and there was this kind of dystopian side of the world that happened. This alien species kind of came and they wanted to kind of preserve the Earth for all of its amazing and abundant resources, but they knew that humans were kind of destroying it, so they slowly started to re-wake up the humans, and they've kind of created this like hybrid race of humans and the alien species that would just really be a lot more sensitive and caring towards the Earth. And I think this was a really I loved reading the book. I thought it was really brilliant, but it posed so many different interesting questions about like this idea of control, and is it okay that the aliens came and they kind of created this hybrid race without the consent of the humans? But then what are the possibilities of those sensory experiences, and how can we also just center the Earth and focus on caring for that in the future also? So that was definitely a big influence for me. I can send the name later and maybe you can share it because I don't remember. But
also, like, there's a lot of books that we're interested in as well that aren't, or authors that we love who are not just science fiction. So Ursula Le Guin is another one. I think the book is, I think it's called The Dispossessed, and it's also, again, it's also about this question of humanity and how we can preserve the earth. And there's this kind of division, and they're living on two separate planets now. One is this very kind of like ultra-capitalist, really, they just like love money and love wealth, and they don't really care about anything. And the other one has this very, I'd actually say it's a very like protopian, very utopian, idealistic way of living, where that society, it's almost like every child is parented by every adult in the community. There's a big focus on caring for the community as a whole, but the main thing is that people don't have jobs or work for money. They just are focusing on the things that they're interested in. And that's also another really brilliant book that I recommend. But we also really love a lot of magic realism books. Like Haruki Murakami was one of our like really the fundamental things that we connected over when we first started working together. I think we just really like very surreal, very subverted kind of situations and stories. So hopefully that answers the question. And then the second question, I can't remember what it was.
What about like your experience with the different possibilities of literature as you experience it versus your own work that's in the gaming engine?
Okay, sure. Yeah, I think this is it's kind of a challenge, and it's one that we face a lot. I think especially all because we all enjoy writing, and when you write, it's so immediate. You can create these very like visceral and imaginative worlds, and reading can be the most immersive experience because all you're doing is just imagining and kind of creating this world whilst you're experiencing just reading it. So for us, it is always a challenge because we start off with this writing, and we all have a slightly different imagination of what that world is, even though we've written it together. And then when we try to physicalize it or digitalize it in the gaming engine, we usually end up going in completely different directions because what we've imagined and when we start going about making that process, it tends to lean in on the side of experimentation, I think, where we're like, okay, I know I want to create this character has fur all over their body, but then they have this different type of hair. But what happens when I actually start making it is I get excited by a different technique, and I realize that that's going to actually illustrate that idea even better. So I think it's a constant kind of like tug of war. Somehow you're kind of sticking to the original writing and knowing that you definitely want to be able to articulate something very specific, but also allowing it to evolve with the medium as well, and allowing ourselves to be fluid in the engine. Because I think one thing that we enjoy about reading and about writing is that it is very fluid. So working in a gaming engine can be inherently not fluid, and it can be, if you don't enjoy working like that, it can be a really difficult and arduous task. So for us, we just focus on trying to find ways, without having had like a background in programming, just having an interest in doing that, we find ways that work for us that allow us to be creative and fluid within the confines of that kind of structure, I guess.
Nice. Thank you. Yes, another question.
Being a different reality at the center of your work and presenting the digital work in a physical space as gallery and whatever, are you trying to express this difference in reality in the physical space as well for the user? Has it distorted with the writing or the perception of the legal presence?
Do you mean like trying to allow them to have that different experience through the different mediums that we're working with?
Yeah, is it presented physically as well?
Yeah.
What is important in the physical installation?
I think for us, the importance behind that, I think that's a really good question, because actually we do work a lot with basically very digital mediums, so there's a lot of kind of institutions who don't really understand why we want to make a big installation at the same time, or why we want to do something else, but something kind of physical and more tangible. But for us, it's
you can't really separate your body from an experience. I know you can have these virtual experiences, and being on your phone can be just as legitimate and just as fulfilling, or like being online can be like that. But I think for us the way we like to approach it is that you will have these like physical experiences, that it's not just about the storyline or the kind of like the sound or the kind of like the visual aspect of the game. It's also thinking about, well, how can we create an environment that allows you to actually relax more into this world. So we're going to be presenting this work in a show in Japan in October, and one thing that we're thinking about in the installation is how we can create this very like comfortable and unique and modular seating that also has kind of it's also infused with lavender, so it creates a kind of calming experience in the space. So because only one person can play the game at a time, it also encourages other people to kind of relax and be calm in the space. And I guess it allows them to be open to the experience also. So hopefully that answers the question. But I think it's, for us, it is about experience. So we try to have like multitudes of experience within one type of work or one presentation of it.
Thank you. And another question from you guys. Who dares? Should I fill some in? I have one more question in the back here, and then happy for another one. You have to probably speak up quite a bit from back there.
Almost any civilization around at all, so I found this kind of interesting, and I was wondering if you can elaborate on that, or maybe I thought that, or my thoughts are that maybe you are suggesting that we kind of go back from a history kind of ways of transmitting our past history from a written form to, again, a mouth-to-mouth form, which was kind of...
Mm-hmm. I think really this like the beginning environments that you see in this first chapter of the game, they're intentionally very abstracted from a kind of like physical city or a community or any kind of, you don't really encounter many other creatures as well, and it's really the main kind of feeling that we're trying to drive with that at the beginning is this kind of feeling that you've just woken up in this new evolution, and that you're kind of lost, and that you're rediscovering yourself. And some of the kind of battle scenes that you see that I showed in some of the clips that are more like, they make use of more traditional gaming mechanics. They're really, although they're using traditional like fighting mechanics, it's really, we're kind of trying to subvert it as well, because those spirits are supposed to represent the internal spirits that you have with yourself and the kind of the battles that you face internally. So as the game progresses, it will start to become more kind of civilized, I suppose, or be in more like civilizations. So I think it's really just this beginning part about kind of really emphasizing this feeling of vulnerability. But I think for us anyway, we're also within this world, it's about kind of imagining how societies can exist differently anyway. So we haven't really got to that stage yet, but in the next chapter, I think we're definitely going to be kind of like, there'll be more characters and there'll be more like physical worlds or rooms rather than just environments. And I didn't really get to show too much from the end part of the game, but you already start to see a more kind of like castle type environment. I guess it feels a bit more historic as opposed to just something that's very like natural and environmental. But yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
And did you have a follow-up question here or not?
I want to ask, as a collective, and as you all started, or was only two of you at the beginning, as both art student or artist, how is the division task, or how do you collaborate in it?
Sure. So yeah,
can I add on? Sorry, to this one, great question. And also, what's the key? how you make it work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that and that.
Okay, so yeah, there are three of us, and it's something, this collaboration that we have with one another, it's very, I think we've been working together for a very long time, and we've spent like pretty much every day together, whether we don't even live in the same countries, but we're talking to each other every single day. And the way that we started working together was so like organic and nobody told us how to do anything, so we just tried doing it in so many different methods. And I think it has been really challenging. Like, you can't deny working with other people isn't challenging, but it's also amazing and it's like incredibly fulfilling. But the way that we've managed to kind of figure it out and how we can like work together is just, I think, just through the process of experimenting and figuring out. It took us finding individually what we like doing whilst we were collaborating to kind of come up with more productive ways of working. So we know, for example, like I actually much prefer doing like very technical things. I like kind of I like making, I like kind of being left alone. I don't really like spending a lot of time with other people. I'm also the more shy one. I don't really enjoy doing these kind of talks and things. But the others are, like Hannah, for example, loves doing narrative and is really good at looking at the overview and kind of thinking about the concepts that everyone's talking about and tying them together. And then Izzy, for example, is really, really brilliant at this kind of the end stage of the project where she can it's not just the end stage, it's thinking about it the whole time, thinking about how you can make these very embodied and very cinematic experiences. And I think because we all have these kind of different interests and different approaches that we understand now, it allows us to kind of think, okay, well, we've got this project coming up. We know that this is the ideas that we want to work on. Let's just go away and kind of do it a bit independently and come back together on a regular basis. But I don't think there's really like one key thing that makes it work. I think it's really unique in every single relationship. But I think just one thing is because we were friends first, we've always tried to kind of like center that friendship and also always maintain that we're kind of like caring for one another and trying to support what the other one wants to do. If it's something different or something new, we'll try and make space for that. But it's also challenging, it always is, when you have different styles of working. But it's taken us, I think, like quite a few years to actually be able to say, oh, I don't like doing that, I don't want to do it like that, or I want to do it like that. I actually need to be around people to work and to like spark ideas, or I don't want to be. So I think it just takes time. I don't really know the answer specifically, but yeah.
Beautiful, thank you. Is there one more question for you guys? Yes.
First, do you have some sponsorships, like the companies that are
from like
always helping you, like on a yearly basis, or it's always different?
With companies, do you mean like tech companies, or?
Yeah, some kind of sponsorships. Maybe it's big companies that are interested in your art and they just give you the money, so to say, to make the art. And this is the first, and like the main question is, when was the first sponsor and who was that? Like, who was interested in this and who gave you the possibility to
So we haven't, as much as we work with different like tech mediums, we haven't really had that many, like if any, sponsorships from tech companies directly. Most of the funding or opportunities we get do come through like museums and gallery institutions, so the funding's really tight and we just scrimp and manage. But we recently a project that we were able to borrow some like Vive 360 headsets from them for a couple of weeks, which was great because we didn't have to pay for them. But and they kind of supported us in that process. But from tech companies, that's kind of, as far as I can remember, that's kind of it. But we were like very, very lucky to, I think it was at the end of 2021, we were nominated for the Chanel Next Prize, and that kind of sponsored 10 artists. They got a bunch of funding each, and that is kind of has allowed us to kind of like cement our practice and do certain things like pay for a studio or just support our living costs as well, because as 3 people, when you do collaborate, especially when you're first collaborating, it's very, very easy to end up in situations where you're barely being paid as one artist, even though you're 3. So I think for some reason we just have this strange dedication to it, and we suffered for a long time, but it has, I guess, it gets a bit easier once you start to work with institutions. You can start to enforce more kind of like specific ways of working or specific kind of budgets, and you know that you need certain things. I think when we were younger, we were way more willing to compromise on certain aspects of the financial way that we were working, but I think now we're just like, oh no, enough, it's too exhausting. But yeah, hopefully that answers.
Then maybe I come to my final question, if I don't see a hand going up. Yes, and that's a generic one each time. Your final piece of advice for all the becoming cultural producers.
I don't know what my advice would be. I think it's really important to understand the things that you yourself actually enjoy, and try to understand how those processes look like and what those mediums are and what those concepts and ideas are. I think it's really easy, especially when you're at art school or when you're surrounded by a lot of different artists or different people working in different mediums. It's very easy to kind of like get swayed in by the thinking of other people, and I think that that's something that can happen, and it can make you feel kind of not so, like you don't really understand what you're doing. So I think our biggest advice from like our practice and the way that we've learned is really figuring out what those processes and those mediums look like for us individually, and I think that helps you really find the enjoyment in what you're doing, and that just makes it a really, even though it's challenging, it makes it a much better process, because you're actually doing it for yourself, not just because it's kind of like happening. And I think it's very easy for that to happen because projects come in quickly and there's not always a big budget, but we always try and, with our approach of world building, because we don't just kind of get one project and then that finishes and it's like bye-bye, we move on to the next one. Everything is very much like, we'll try and, if we get funding from like 3 small places, we'll try and make that all one project so we can do something much larger and something much bigger and something that fits to our needs. We try not to fit into the needs of the other like museums and institutions, because then you also end up with something that you're not really that satisfied with. So trying to know those things and push for them, I think is good advice.
Beautiful. So that said, a warm applause please for Danny and Keiken. Thank you so much for a really incredible closure of our Juxtaposition lecture series. I thank you all very much for being here all throughout the semester. You have been a wonderful crowd with great questions. I hope you enjoyed the series as much as I did, and I hope I will see some of you again next semester for another round of Juxtaposition. Thanks so much, and thanks again for Danny. And our wonderful team, Leon and Filipe, for always recording these lectures in such a perfect way. So good luck with everything last week.
Yeah, good luck.
Happy Monday.